100.1 FM and AM 1020 KDKA. It's Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause. Talk, listen, and speak to the region's most influential leaders. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause.
Welcome in, everyone, to Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Thanks for listening on KDKA. Great show lined up for you. We begin right out of the box tonight with Ed Mooney, District 213 Vice President. We'll begin the show getting an update, the very latest, Ed, if there's anything to report other than noise on the Post-Gazette workers and their plight to get to the table and get a conversation that will lead to getting a deal done. What's the very latest?
So we met with them Monday and Tuesday of this week. We actually did make some progress on them on a healthcare issue where they were thought they were incapable or unable to deduct healthcare costs pre-tax. We had attorneys point out to them that their advice they were given was mistaken, and in fact, they do have a plan that exists within the company to deduct it pre-tax, even for employees who are not in their company-sponsored plan. So while it seems like a small breakthrough and an obvious thing to everyone who does negotiations, that you can do that, that took some convincing even, and we were able to make some headway with that, at least for the 2 days.
And I don't want to over-embellish that as being significant, but that is a positive, correct? Yeah. It
was progress based on what we had before and what they thought. After they removed the guild from the Teamsters healthcare plan illegally, as it turns out, the board ruled against them. And obviously, when you have 200 people in a healthcare plan and you remove the largest group, it spikes the cost for the others. So that was the result of it, was the cost spiked, and then they didn't believe they could deduct it. So while minimal progress, it seemed something that was obvious to everybody else. They finally have acknowledged that they were given bad advice and are willing to correct that. So hopefully it's a sign that we can move forward here and that the pressure that's been put on them by every other aspect of this strike, the community, the public pressure from the politicians and their customers, hopefully something's beginning to sink in.
There was last Tuesday, there was a state of the strike meeting for all of the workers who continued to remain strong. And as you mentioned, part of that fuel is the support, the 360 degrees of support that the workers are receiving. What do you see, Ed? How do you, from the ground, you've been around a long time, brother. What do you see from the workers? Are they steadfast? Do they maintain their solidarity? They're in this thing until we get to closure.
Oh, yeah, I think the solidarity of these groups, the Teamsters, the CWA, and the guild groups, is unmatched at this point. This strike has actually brought them closer together, and they realize that they need each other in these processes, and they're working better together every single day. Who picks up an assignment, whether it's a guild member picking up an assignment to draw up a flyer to write something, or a Teamster member picking up some assignment when we're back to picketing in Butler, and the pressmen and the advertising group. Every unit here is working together as one cohesive unit to bring this strike to a successful conclusion. And if nothing else, that's a positive that comes out of this. Tomorrow will mark the 8th month of the strike. And they keep fighting. Thanks to the community support, a caravan that came up from West Virginia on Saturday brought almost $8,000 in contributions and said more was being sent directly to the strike fund. One young lady brought her own personal check for $25, cried with emotion while handing it over, saying she wished she could do more. And then shortly after that, while bringing everyone else to tears, informs me that the day after, that Sunday, was going to be her 80th birthday.
Wow.
So when we have the support throughout this labor movement and throughout the communities of people like that, and it's us against these companies, then there's no doubt that we're going to win.
Talking with Ed Mooney, District 213 Vice President, giving us an update on the strike. Ed, what's next following the meetings this week? What's on the schedule that you know of, or is there anything concrete moving forward?
So we're waiting to get new dates. The attorney, Joe Pass, was tied up. They had an AFL-CIO lawyers conference this week, so I filled in on Monday and Tuesday for that. And I have been out of touch for at least today, so I'm not aware if there are other dates for next week or not. But I'll be back there next week as we have to continue putting the pressure on the company, in the community and everywhere else to bring this thing to a successful conclusion. But, we thank everyone for their continued support. The politicians throughout the Allegheny County area have been great. The rest of the labor movement throughout Allegheny County, and obviously the customers and the community supporters who are supporting these strikers have been amazing.
Coming up on the other side of the break, we're going to talk with Tori Tambellini, and Tori was very, very instrumental in leading and rallying together all of the workers at the Starbucks, bringing them together. They're getting ready to celebrate their one-year anniversary, and she was insistent in our pre-show meeting of referencing and talking about their support of the Post-Gazette workers and their willingness to continue to come out to the picket line and be as supportive as they possibly can.
Yeah, everybody's been there. The community support, the other labor support, people who continue showing up to help staff these picket lines and take actions. Several weeks ago, we had a safety conference at the Steelworkers and the CWA Health and Safety Conference. All those members turned out to walk the picket lines on Wednesday night with the strikers, and each group, everyone who turns out to support these workers, boosts their spirits and helps them realize that they're not alone in this fight. And there are more of us that believe in workers and good contracts and in collective bargaining than there are of companies who don't believe it. And we just got to continue to stay together, come out and support each other until we're able to get the owners of this company to flip their script, get rid of these attorneys who are trying to break these units, and negotiate a successful contract.
Good stuff from Ed Mooney joining us here, District 213 Vice President, kicking us off on Today in Pittsburgh Labor as we broadcast to you on KDKA. Back in a moment.
We are going on strike because of unfair labor practices where the company literally canceled the health care.
Being a mom on strike and being a single mom on strike to 2 young kids, it's very nerve-wracking, a little bit stressful. I'm doing my best to look at it as everything will work out, and I gotta just trust the situation, but it's very nerve-wracking.
I'm a mailer in the mailroom, been an employee here for 28 years. I'm a third-generation employee. Between my grandpa, my dad, and me, we have close to, if not more than 100 years of loyal employment with this company. You can call the Post-Gazette and tell them you do not want to have a paper delivered. You do not want a paper delivered until this labor dispute is finalized and settled.
And welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause. Special thanks to Ed Mooney, who joined us in that opening segment today here on KDKA as we continue and will continue to update everyone on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette workers who are on strike. Remember that day back in October when all of the workers began their strike. We now are into the month of May. My goodness, Mother's Day is a week away, and yet that strike has not been resolved, despite, as Ed mentioned, some incredible efforts being done to try and get the owners of the Post-Gazette to the table. As promised and as mentioned when we came on the air today, one of the areas that we're going to talk about in Today in Pittsburgh Labor is built around a headline title, The Women's Movement in the Labor Movement, within the labor movement. And I think we've got really a real-time, fantastic story to talk about. It's all built around Starbucks, which everybody knows. Tori Tambellini is going to join us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Tori, thank you so much for coming on. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm excited for you to be able to share the story, and I don't want to get ahead of myself with some of the details, but for the listening audience here on KDKA, May 26, 2022 is a very significant date in your world. Tell us what that date means.
Yeah, that day is the day that my Starbucks store in Market Square won our union election. It was kind of funny. A lot of us really didn't even know what a union was until we heard about the Starbucks stores in Buffalo that had started to organize. And whenever we found out that that was a way that we could get a voice in our workplace, then we just knew exactly what we had to do. So we filed unanimously for our election, and we won on May 26, 2022, with a vote of 8-1.
And as you get ready to come up on what is your one-year anniversary, talk with us, Tori. Help the listening audience kind of wrap their arms around that a little bit. You know, as you made that statement and described that May 26th date, you referenced many of your colleagues didn't even really know what a union was or what it meant to organize. Take us through that process of trying to understand it and why it came to that point.
Yeah, so being in Market Square, a lot of the customers that we saw on a daily basis were unhoused and facing issues such as mental illness, substance abuse problems, and overall it led us to be in a lot of situations that we were not at all equipped to deal with. And management kind of pretended like those issues just weren't happening in our store and completely ignored us. So we decided to form a union after we got in contact with some staff organizers from Workers United. Somebody actually showed up in our store and started talking to us about Workers United, and we were 100% convinced that they were a corporate spy. So we created a fake email address under a fake name, and we emailed them back, and when they turned out to be legit, we started having weekly meetings with the staff organizer, and they told us all about how to get cards signed and how to file for an election. And after we'd won our own election, we started to organize the other stores around us. So the movement is very worker-led, and once one store learns how to organize a store, they help other partners at other Starbucks locations do the same. So it's been very worker-led, and since winning the election, I've been helping stores in Pittsburgh and Washington, D.C., and West Virginia file for their own union elections as well.
You know, one of the statements that I've always believed, and I've find myself making this statement often, and I'll ask you to react to it. Never has there ever been a time before than now that workers need the protection of a union.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the pandemic really highlighted how much unions are necessary in every industry. When Starbucks took away our pandemic-related benefits in October of 2020, we all realized that it was kind of unfair that we didn't get a say in that. And once we started thinking about how unfair that was, we realized that a lot of the working conditions we were experiencing were really unfair. We face consistent hour cuts. Like every month, it seems like everyone who works at Starbucks is receiving less and less hours. We get raises of mere pennies, while our CEO at the time of the pandemic, Kevin Johnson, had received a $40 million or a 40% raise that year, while we received raises of, I think, 10 cents that same year. And I think that it really highlighted that no matter what industry you're in and no matter like who you are, a union protection is absolutely necessary. We always say if you have a boss, you need a union.
And Tori, as you mentioned, this Starbucks, the organization of workers, worker-led, is now, I think you mentioned, there are 12 stores in the surrounding area that have now become union. This really is a movement.
Absolutely. I'm actually really proud to say that Pittsburgh is the city in the United States with the most union Starbucks stores. We are kind of paving the way with the 12 stores that we have. And we just hit 300 stores nationwide. and our movement encompasses nearly 8,000 Starbucks baristas from across the country.
We're talking with Tori Tambellini, who's joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We're talking about the organization of workers forming a union at Starbucks. As Tori mentioned, this began May 26th of 2022, and they're getting ready to come up on their one-year anniversary. Tori, do you have any memories or thoughts that stick in your mind about the early stages of this coming together? Resistance, for example, that you received from your store. What kind of obstacles did you have to overcome?
We definitely had a lot of obstacles. Starbucks has just been running an absolute scorched earth union busting campaign. It's just been, I think, we are now up to 50 complaints. They've found merit. The NLRB has found merit in 50 complaints nationwide, with accusations of over 1,300 instances of employer misconduct. So it definitely hasn't been easy. We had captive audience meetings where our store manager gave us handouts saying things like, if Workers United thinks you're going to lose your union election, they are going to withdraw your petition and abandon you. They gave us really scary examples of contract proposals that we could be bargaining for that said things like, you know, if you have a union at your store, you could lose your benefits. You won't be able to transfer to your hometowns for the summer. If you're a college student and you work at a store in your hometown during the summer, you won't be able to transfer there. You can't pick up shifts at other Starbucks stores, which is a benefit that a lot of us like in the face of the hour cuts. One of the ways that we handle that is by picking up shifts at other stores. So that was really scary. We were told that we wouldn't be given any raises. And at one point, our store manager even handed out a printout with a bunch of fake social media posts from Starbucks Workers United. And this was really scary to us because, like I said, a lot of us really didn't know anything about organizing or about what having a union even meant. So when we were getting this misinformation, it was kind of difficult for us to combat that. We were given bribes such as, if you vote no to the union, we will remodel the bathroom in the cafe. And we were given threats like, if you make one tiny little mistake, you'll be immediately terminated, which was new from the start of union campaign. Like after we filed, we started seeing rules being enforced much more strictly. And of course, we've had a lot of firings. I was actually terminated from my store for organizing along with one other worker at my store on July 13th. We have 18 fired partners in Pittsburgh who were fired as retaliation for organizing, and 256 fired partners across the country at Starbucks. So the retaliation has been kind of brutal, and it's definitely scared a lot of people away, but the people that are here and the people that continue to organize are standing strong. And, you know, we always say, like, one day longer, one day stronger. But on a positive note, I would say, like, something that really stands out to me was right before our voting day, we were all working. There were maybe 5 or 6 of us working at the time, and the United Steelworkers, there were actually about 40 United Steelworkers in my cafe, and they kind of held a little surprise rally, and all of them were shouting, "Get up, get down, Pittsburgh is a union town." And I think that brought us like so much joy in a time when we were facing a lot of union busting. I feel like it made us realize, like, oh, this isn't just a Market Square thing or just a Starbucks thing. Like, our entire community has our backs, and that's kind of the day I really learned what solidarity meant and realized that, wow, we're not in this alone. We have the entire community behind us, and that was really, really powerful.
Tori Tambellini is joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. So glad that we have Tori joining us. We're going to continue our conversation with Tori. First, we'll pause for a break. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause. Back in a moment.
Pittsburgh is a union town, so when the owners of the Post-Gazette hire out-of-town lawyers to try to break our unions, we don't back down. Workers at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette are on strike, and we need your support. We're the ones who design, print, and distribute the paper, sell ads, handle accounts, and create Pulitzer Prize-winning journalism. We help our neighbors stay informed day in and day out, but we haven't had a raise in over 15 years. And the owners of the paper block communications illegally cut our health care. We deserve better. We deserve respect. Please keep our strike strong and show the Millionaire Block family we're not alone. If you subscribe to the paper, cancel your subscription. If you read stories online, don't visit the site until the strike is resolved. Support our strike. Drop the Post-Gazette. Visit ppgstrike.org.
Paid for by the Communications Workers of America.
And welcome back, everyone, to Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We thank everybody, as we always do, for tuning in and listening to our weekly show here on KDKA. Our special guest today is Tori Tambellini, who is joining us. And Tori, as you heard in our previous segment, is getting ready, along with her other colleagues and workers, to celebrate their one-year anniversary. May 26, 2022 is when the organization of the Starbucks workers actually became real and came to fruition. Tori, I want you to elaborate a little bit, if you will, as we begin this segment, about what you're doing now, because you had mentioned you were fired. You were fired for organizing the workers.
Yeah, so now I'm on staff full-time with Workers United as a staff organizer, mostly in the Mid-Atlantic region, so Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland, and Washington, D.C. So I've been helping other stores to organize. We have like a website where Starbucks workers can reach out to a staff organizer, and once I see those people fill out the form on the website, I reach out to them and start walking them through the process of getting cards signed, combating the union busting at their store, and winning their own union elections. We're also working a lot on bargaining right now. So our proposals are being written by a team of over 100 Starbucks workers from across the country, our National Bargaining Committee. And those proposals are finished up, and we are just fighting to get the company to bargain with us. We have had over 150 bargaining sessions across the country, and in nearly every single bargaining session, the company has walked out after only 3 or 4 minutes and refused to bargain with us. So now we are working with partners to plan national strikes, to plan collective actions like marches on the bus, info picketing, and other actions like that to show Starbucks that we're not backing down and that we are not going away and that they are going to have to bargain with us one way or another.
You know, we spend a lot of time on Today in Pittsburgh Labor talking about the Post-Gazette workers who are on strike. They went out on strike in October. The last contract, or the expiration of the last contract, goes back to 2017. They're dealing with the owners of Block Communications, who also own the Post-Gazette. And it's a similar story where they find themselves negotiating against themselves, and despite a court order, despite a court ruling, despite multiple efforts to get something into what at least would be the start of trying to get a deal done, they just can't do it. The resistance continues from the other side. Talk about that a little bit, because it sounds like you're dealing with it on your end, and yet you now get a chance to see another union, what the Post-Gazette workers who remain on strike are dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I definitely want to say that Starbucks Workers United in Pittsburgh definitely stands with the striking Post-Gazette workers. We've been out in the picket lines with them on Saturdays and standing out with them frequently. So we really support our striking Post-Gazette workers here. And I think something that we're doing with Starbucks to avoid this going on for too much longer is working with like the brand image that Starbucks puts out. You know, they pretend to be this really, really progressive company. You know, they have they do like a pride celebration. They give us t-shirts that have like the Black Lives Matter slogans on them, and they pretend to be this really progressive and accepting company. But when you really look at them, And you hear stories from the workers at these Starbucks stores. This company is not as progressive as they claim to be. So I feel like part of our strategy is to be like highlighting that Starbucks is not as progressive and as awesome of a company as they claim to be, and like really showing that through our stories of the times that the company has refused to bargain with us. And so that's what we're doing now. And we are trying to get them to agree to these proposals like one by one, like just trying to get the company to admit that they wrongfully denied us credit card tipping and implement the credit card tipping at Starbucks stores. I don't know if I mentioned that, but they've been withholding new benefits. Like at the very beginning of the campaign, one of the union's main demands was credit card tipping. So in response to that, Starbucks gave all of the non-union stores credit card tipping and refused to implement that at the union stores. So we're trying to start small, start with give the union stores the credit card tipping that you gave to the non-union stores, and trying to go from there. I'm definitely new to this.
Tori, do you get discouraged by their actions, or more motivated by the resistance that you and your colleagues have to face?
Honestly, I think I get a lot more motivated by it, especially since I know that every single day I'm meeting new leaders on this campaign. I hear from people across the country every day, and meeting all the new Starbucks workers is really motivating to me. And I know that I have a really dedicated group of people who are not going to back down no matter what this company does. So that's what keeps me going. And it can be tough. There are definitely hard days on the campaign where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how we're ever going to get this contract. This company is absolutely brutal, but I feel really encouraged and really confident that we're going to get a contract within the next year.
And we just have a couple of minutes left, Tori, and we're talking with Tori Tambellini, and we've built this focus and invited Tori to come on the show under the umbrella of women union leaders who are changing the landscape in Pittsburgh. And of course, you're listening to Today in Pittsburgh Labor on KDKA. Tori, use the platform, which is this radio station, KDKA, which, as you know, is just a tremendous radio station with a huge reach. Anybody who lives in Western Pennsylvania, I believe, listens to KDKA. Take a moment and talk to the listeners and help them understand why you do what you do, why it is important for workers to have a union.
Yeah. Let me think about that for a minute.
And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but the interview that we've had has been really meaningful, and you've talked about you've covered a lot of ground in the short amount of time. So if you're comfortable doing it, please do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this movement is really meaningful to me for a lot of reasons. I think number one, it's really important to show companies like Starbucks and like other companies that are organizing right now, like Amazon, Chipotle, the Post-Gazette. I think it's really important to show the bosses that workers aren't going to stand for this kind of treatment anymore. And they can't ignore us. They can't stall enough to wait us out. They have to bargain with us. They have to give us what we deserve. And sorry, there's one other thing I was thinking, but I'm blanking on what it is.
No, that's okay. I get it though.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand, and I get your thought process behind it. I've always tried to educate the public to understand what it means if you're a Starbucks worker, or in this case, if you're a Post-Gazette worker, the legendary Post-Gazette, where there are generational families that are workers for the Post-Gazette, and they find themselves on strike with benefits in jeopardy, and they can't get a conversation at the bargaining table, and it's just so frustrating.
Yeah, it is really frustrating, and that's why it's meaningful to me. I think that we're seeing CEOs of corporations like Starbucks and like the Post-Gazette that are literally billionaires while their workers are struggling to make ends meet. And I think a lot of people in my generation specifically have spent our entire lives watching politicians on TV like make promises like we're going to raise the minimum wage, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But over time, we started to realize that no one's going to do it for us. Like the only thing that we have left is to stand up for ourselves and stand up for each other and rely on that. And that's why I think that this is really meaningful, because if we want something done, we're going to do it ourselves, whether you're a Starbucks worker or a Post-Gazette journalist or a steel worker. Like, I think that, like, standing up for ourselves and caring about each other, sometimes that's all we can do, and I think it's the best thing to do, and I think that's really meaningful to me.
Tori Tambellini joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor with a riveting story, a boatload of accomplishments in a short amount of time. Tori, congrats to you as you continue your journey. By the way, I'll end on this. You're waiting for the outcome of when you were fired for organizing. What are you waiting on? To perhaps be reinstated back into your position? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so on January 23rd, we had our trial for the illegal terminations of 4 workers throughout Pittsburgh: James Green, Brett Tabarelli, Kimberly Manfrey, and myself. We are all illegally terminated for organizing at our stores, and we are hoping for full back pay and reinstatement to our jobs. There's nothing more meaningful to me than being on the shop floor with my coworkers fighting for the contract we deserve. So as much as I love being a staff organizer, I know that I need to be back in my store with my coworkers, because I think that's the most important thing for me. So I'm really hoping to be reinstated to my job sooner rather than later.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause. Special thanks to Tori Tambellini, who joined us for the previous 2 segments. Just incredible conversation with Tori and her road to the organization of the workers at the Starbucks stores, part of what she referred to as a national movement. And a little bit later on in the month, May 26th of 2023, they will celebrate their 1-year anniversary. When we kicked off the show back at the 11 o'clock hour at the very beginning of the broadcast, Ed Mooney, District 213 Vice President from the CWA, joined us just to give us an update and progress made in terms of one specific conversation around health care. That was this past week at the table as the workers, striking workers, get ready to or are now in month number 8. Before we say goodbye to you on this Sunday night here on KDKA, I do want to point out and draw your attention to a project that was released by the Communication Workers of America, CWA. Go to iscspanbias.com. Let me do that again for you. iscspanbias.com is the website. So it's ISCSPAN biased, BIASED.com. So iscspanbiased.com. That's where I would like you to go the next time you're scrolling and you are online. This is Today in Pittsburgh with J-Doc and Krause. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and being a part of Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We will continue to update everyone. And a reminder, quickly, don't forget, go to unionprogress.com and make it a habit to read all of the great stories that are being published by the striking workers. It's a striking digital platform. That's unionprogress.com. We'll continue to keep you updated on Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause on behalf of all of the union workers who are fighting for their brothers and sisters. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next time.